In this series, we're talking about emotional intelligence. And the way we're defining that is being aware of and responding appropriately to your own feelings, and being aware of and responding appropriately to the feelings of others. And in this video, let's talk about some emotional intelligence landmines. In other words, some things that get in the way of healthy emotional interactions with other people. And one of those things that's common often in ministry is people pleasing. So Ashton, how have you encountered that in your life, in your ministry?
Yeah, well, thanks, Ross. I think that it's really easy, especially when I started in ministry, to try to meet everybody's expectations, and whatever they threw your way, you would just say, "Oh, I'll get right to that, and I'll take care of that."
Right.
And what I found very quickly was that there's a never-ending list of things to do to help people.
Right.
And if I wasn't careful, I would just drown under the weight of that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then, how did you find that affecting you emotionally?
Well, the sad reality is sometimes I would actually begin to resent people a bit when they would come to me with concerns or questions, and I didn't know why, and I felt guilty about that, which actually just leads to a cycle and a spiral with needing to help people more, which increases that and makes it actually worse.
Right, because it just doesn't work out that way. Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Ashton. Matt, any thoughts about people pleasing and emotions and how that works?
Yeah, I think if we're centered on trying to please God, that's going to be something that'll help us in our interactions with others. So I think that kind of gives you that kind of balance as you're approaching others and their desires, their needs. Otherwise, you'll find yourself running around losing energy really quick.
Yeah, it'll tear you up, and in a lot of different ways, but including emotionally, because then I kind of deny my own feelings and my own frustration or my own, because I feel like I got to make other people happy too. So how about another one that can be chronic for a lot of people in ministry is what I call emotion faking, right? And so how does that work for people in ministry, do you think, Matt?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of times pastors are looked at as having to have everything all together.
Right.
And so if you show any kind of vulnerability, maybe you lose respect. I think nowadays people actually respond more to transparency and genuine feelings that a pastor would have. I can remember even yesterday in our congregation, one of the gentlemen came in who's fighting cancer, and it broke me just to see him dealing with that. So the challenge is how can you maintain empathy, not take on the burden, but still actually feel, and that is a challenge, and you have to kind of catch yourself sometimes. Yeah,
that's a great point. Ashton, thoughts on that?
Well, I can't say it much better than that. I was just thinking yesterday at one of our campuses, I was dealing with a health issue, and it's been kind of long term. And rather than just kind of faking how I was feeling and say everything is great, praise God, everything's awesome, I said, guys, things are really good, but I'm also going through this health struggle right now, and I would actually like you guys to pray for me. Right. So I invited them into that moment and kind of made it a winning situation for them to be involved in ministry, as well as just like the leader being always ministering to others. Right. And I think that was a healthy level of disclosure to let them in on what was, hey, I'm not always, super strong with my health, and that's okay,
And that's a great point, because that helps to model good emotional intelligence to them.
Sure.
So it's because you show that you're aware of what's going on and you're willing to share it, and respond appropriately. It gives them a way to say, oh, that's okay then to be vulnerable. It's okay to be authentic. Yeah, for sure.
One of the things, if I could add, one of the things that we have to really teach our congregation is that we follow and love God not because of how we feel. We don't have to fake like everything is okay. And they're going to need to see us model as pastors, how do we trust God and rely on Him even in difficulty? And just because we're honoring Him and obeying Him doesn't mean we won't have difficulty.
Right.
So if we just fake that everything's okay, I think we're setting them up for real confusion and failure.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. So, we've said it in another video that our own emotional intelligence, our own emotional health really does set a trend or a basis for the whole congregation's emotional health as well. So that's why we're dealing with these issues. How about one of the things that pastors can often get so busy that we don't take time to reflect on our lives and reflect on our emotions.
Yeah.
So have you experienced that? Or have you learned from that?
Yeah. The danger, at least that I fall into, is that when I do my reflecting, sometimes I'm talking with my spouse about a deep pain or a deep hurt, or I process with her. And so one of the things I have to do is guard her from that sometimes a little bit, because I don't want her to pick up a borrowed offense.
Yes.
The other thing I've noticed is that I find in my mind, when I do process, I'm always finishing the story. Why did this person leave the church? And I have to create some kind of reason or story about why that happened, or why did this person respond that way? And so I think I'm right now trying not to do that, and instead just let it be, and not have to have the full story for why something happened or why someone's responding.
That's a good point.
And just let that be.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, well, for me personally, I feel like reflection is really the thing that, if you could create a structure, for me, reflection is kind of the roof. It's the thing that keeps the rain out of the building.
Okay. Yeah,
and
yeah,
so,
that's a good analogy.
so if I don't know if that works, but it works for me. If I'm reflecting on my life, I'm able to catch those leaky places in the roof. I'm able to catch those things that if I maybe didn't reflect, that would become a long-term issue, and it could actually ruin the building. Yeah. And so one of my favorite thoughts is, if we reflect on the past, reflect on what's happening in ministry, we won't make, hopefully, the same mistakes that we made in the past and repeat those in future iterations, Yeah. So for me, that's that roof. That's that, keeping everything dry, keeping that, I guess you could also say it's a foundational piece too. Right. But for me, reflection it's something that I don't have time. I can't afford not to do it, basically. Right. And I think the temptation is to think, well, I'm too busy, and I'm serving God, I'm doing all these great things, the world needs me, and then you can get into this Superman complex.
That whole thing,
Yeah.
So. Because it doesn't always feel urgent to take the time to stop and think and pray about what's going on.
Yep.
Well, here's one more thing that a lot of pastors struggle with that has to do with our emotional health, and that is conflict avoidance. I hate conflict, and God's had to deal with me in some ways. But let's talk about how conflict avoidance undermines our ability to interact with other people in emotionally healthy ways.
Yeah, wow. Well, one of the stories that jumps to mind right off the bat is where Jacob wrestles with God.
Yeah, there's a conflict.
And there's a conflict, and he basically says, this is an issue for me, and I want resolution. And they jump into it. Or Job, and God, another example. And I think, particularly with Job, we see that God does not condemn Job at the end of the story for being real and honest. Yeah. He actually condemns his friends for giving the pat answer and these things that aren't true about who God is.
That's a good point.
And so, for me, that's a good model and a good reminder. And King David, another in the Psalms, right? He's pouring out his heart to God. He's open, he's honest, and the Bible says that he's a man after God's own heart. Right. And so for us, dealing in relationship with people, we start to realize, I think, that the point is not to be perfect. The point is to be real. Yeah. And if we can model that, we actually model to people what a healthy relationship actually looks like. Yeah. Is to be real with God. Yeah. And then that helps to transfer to others.
And to our relationships with others as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. Matt, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think where this plays out, at least in my experience, the most is in staff relationships. Okay. Whether it's with a volunteer or a staff person, if there's an issue, if there's a problem, or if there's something you're expecting, a lot of times we just assume that the staff person should know what we want. Right. And then if we avoid communicating or we avoid dealing with the problem, number one, that frustrates me. Sure. Right. And it causes this tension to exist with your staff, and really can implode into something pretty awful. And it not only does it affect me, how I feel, but it affects the other person. Yeah, sure. I'm not giving them the opportunity to improve, or here's an issue you should work on. Right. And how caring and loving is that? So I think this is a real issue. Yeah. And I heard one guy once say, kill the reptile. Reptiles never grow, or they always grow. They keep on growing all the time. Yeah. And I think conflict avoidance is like that.
Yeah.
If you don't deal with it
Huh.
and take care of it,
Yeah.
it's going to get bigger and bigger, and bigger.
Harder.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really insightful. And so, as you're looking at this, I hope you understand that these are issues that are going to keep you from really understanding, dealing with your own feelings and with the feelings of other people as well, and how important it is to have emotional health when you're in ministry, because ministry is all about people. And so we're going to talk about in this series some ways that you can develop your emotional intelligence and your emotional health. But first, we wanted to make sure that you're aware of these landmines so that you can let the Holy Spirit lead you away from these into some healthier directions. Thanks for watching today.